These are the hardest days, don't you worry anymore. 'Cause when life looks like easy street, there is danger at your door. Think this through with me. Let me know your mind.
The class has grown exponentially in the last 4 years, and I'd like to explore that. What do you think makes a class successful?
I attribute it to the boat itself and the whole philosophy of why this boat exists. It was conceived in the Pirates' Den at the Newport Harbor Yacht Club in the late 90s. Basically, you had some guys, older guys, spending a lot of time in the bar commiserating about the fact that they weren't sailing their logistically challenging one-design boats like Etchells and Stars and bigger race boats. And they were spending time at the yacht club, but they were no longer sailing. And they said, well, we need a boat that we can go out and sail, and we want something that's a day sailor. We want to be able to bring the family, bring the dog. We want to be able to be ready to go sailing in a few minutes. We don't want to be dragging things around, all sails. And the idea was born as to what it is they wanted. And from that point, they went out and looked for a boat. Then they spent a year or two looking for a boat, and they found that the boat that they had imagined didn't exist. At that point, they started looking for a boat designer. They had already put together some fundamental requirements that they thought this boat should have. And they ended up finding a boat builder and a designer right in the backyard. They found Steve Schock, a boat designer for W.D. Schock. And one thing led to another, and they ended up designing this very traditional looking boat that's almost all cockpit, roller furling jib, self-tending jib, and they did a bunch of other things that makes the class unique from a simplistic point of view. There's no winches, there's no spinnakers. The seat backs in this boat are, what are they? 10, you probably know the number, but
No, they're about 18 inches high.
Probably 18 inches high. In some respects, from a comfort point of view, it's kind of like sailing a couch as compared to other sport boats where you aren't comfortable. Well, one of the things that this has really helped make happen is people are comfortable on the boat. Women are comfortable on the boat. And what you'll find is the vast majority of people sailing this boat, certainly in Fleet 1, the vast majority of people racing this boat are racing with 2 people, and those 2 people are couples. Most of them are married, some are not, but the majority of the boats are sailed by couples. That, as I think, is the most unique thing about this fleet.
I think that's characteristic of all the fleets, the Harbor 20 fleets. The factory tracks, the number of skippers, race skippers, and of all the fleets of Harbor 20s, it's about 20 to 30% are actually women who are skippering these boats. And certainly in Santa Barbara, they have a similar ratio of men to women on the boats. The class champs that you just led, about 60% of the 41 boats were spouse or boyfriend-girlfriend teams.
Yeah, the comfort has a lot to do with it. The other thing that has a lot to do with it is the sheer simplicity of the whole program. I think the boat is, Harbor 20 is one. I think you could also call it a hassle-free 20. We tend to keep the focus off the boats completely. We don't want people to focus on the boats. We don't want them changing them in any way. I also didn't mention the fact that I did mention the fact that the boats have to be in the water. This is in Fleet 1, but they all have only exactly one kind of bottom paint, and so on and so forth. So the boats are very much the same. So rather than focusing on boats and tweaking and spending money, we have put our focus on to helping people be better sailors. And that gets back to the whole educational aspects of this. Not only for brand new people coming in, but for experienced people that maybe are not For instance, aware of the current rules, which change every 4 years. So the classes were designed, each one to have quite a tremendous amount of information that can't be absorbed in a single day. So the result of that is that the majority of people in Fleet 1 have been to each one of these classes between 2 and 6 times each. So people come back, they see the same information, but they understand a little bit more each time, because it has been likened to drinking from a fire hose. So, but it's not just the classroom seminars, because classroom seminars have a place in here, but nobody ever learned how to ski by reading a book. In order to really learn how to do it, you have to go out and do it. That's the most important thing. And so there's something else that's, I think it's fairly unique to this fleet, is if you go out there on any given day, whether there's racing or not, you're often going to find our most experienced sailors sailing with our least experienced sailors. We call that a mentoring program. We actually have some of that sort of formally organized, that you can go on the website, get a mentor, so on and so forth. But it is part of a culture where this fleet pretty much wants everybody to get better. The whole fleet realizes that the better everybody's skills become, the better the entire experience is for everybody out there. So it's very common to go out and see many of our very experienced sailors sailing with our least experienced sailors, and that tends to take less experienced sailors and make them experienced sailors much faster than they could ever have done on their own. And we can see that one individual that has sailed with much better sailors themselves has actually risen from the C fleet to the B fleet to the A fleet in a record amount of time. But that didn't happen in a vacuum. It didn't happen all by himself. It happened because there's a lot of people who all want this to happen.
Talk a little bit about the skill levels of the A's, the B's, and the C's, so the typical profile of these groups.
It really goes the entire gamut of the sailing population that you could find anywhere. The A fleet, at the top end of the A fleet, are basically collegiate and world champion sailors. Quite a few of them. Top match racers, team racers, national champions in various classes, Etchels, Shields, other classes like that.
Stars,
right? Stars, Etchels, Solings, and all of that. But then as you get down to the very
to the C fleet,
the C fleet itself, you have some people have never even been on a sailboat before, and they've got to a point where in life they're looking for something new to do, some new recreation, and this recreation is getting more and more visible because we race these sailboats in Newport Harbor over 100 days a year. So it's very rare you can look out in this harbor and not see this activity going on. People look at that and go, I'd like to do that. They get a boat, and as soon as they get a boat, we get wind of it, we bring them into the fleet, we start bringing them to seminars, we start inviting them to the parties, we send a mentor out with them, and it all just goes from there. Because from May to September, we race these boats 5 days a week, every night, 6 o'clock at a different yacht club. It means that Monday nights we're at American Legion, Tuesday we're at BCYC, Wednesday at BYC, Thursday at Newport Harbor Yacht Club, and Friday at Lido Isle Yacht Club. And every one of those races start at 6. They usually have A, B, and C divisions, and then there is a barbecue or party at the club after all summer long. So there's about 90 parties, 90 or 100 parties just there.
Just in the summer, just in the 5 day a week
just
sailing.
In the 5 day a week. That's how you add up the fact that if you take all those 5 days a week where there are Harbor 20 starts, plus all the high point races during the other half of the year, they add up to somewhere, depending on the year, between 100 and 120 days a year you can race this boat in this harbor. That, I believe, is unique on the planet to any class of boats. While there are about 140 of these boats in this harbor, there are about 70 active racers. But as I said, those 70 are never active at the same time. So we have a certain bunch of people that like to go to American Legion on Monday night. And we'll get 15 boats out there on a Monday night, sometimes 20. On Tuesday night, we have some of the same, and yet other people are out there, and we can have 20 boats out on a Tuesday night. Wednesday night, we'll get a different bunch of people, because Wednesday night it's the other end of the harbor, so the people that tend to live at that, their boats are at that end of the harbor, tend to come to those races. Thursday night is the biggest night of the week. It's easy to get 30 or sometimes 35 boats out there just on a Thursday night, and that's because it's a Newport Harbor Yacht Club, and they are the epicenter of this activity in this harbor. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, it's where it was all invented. So the majority of the racing members in the harbor are Newport Harbor members. And then Friday night, we've been doing something kind of interesting. There's usually somewhere down maybe 10 boats or so on Friday nights, but we call it Friday night flip-flops. And on Friday nights, for people that like the idea, is we switch the skipper and the crew. So the people that normally crew skipper on Friday nights. And that's quite interesting. That's what we do on Friday nights. Deb is the skipper Friday nights, and we started this a few years ago. And I remember the Sutherlands came out, Lee and Holly Sutherland, and they had been sailing their boat for approximately 10 years. They came out the first year to try this out on a flip-flop, and so Lee got in the front of the boat, and he looked at Holly and said, "So, what do I do?" It had been 10 years that they've been sailing the boat. But it's very good to give the crew the perspective of what the skipper is doing, and vice versa, because it really helps the communication on the boat, and it helps people understand what should be communicated on a boat, who should be saying what, when, and what's useful information and helpful, and so on and so forth. So that's just another one of the things we do to help people learn to sail better, and one of those is to see the game from as many perspectives as possible. We were talking about the social aspect and the fact that there's a party every night, but there are also two big organized parties that are supported by the fleet. That is a summer party, which usually has some sort of a regatta aspect to it, and then a party after that, which is a sort of formal dinner. There's usually live music and dancing and all of that sort of thing. And then the other large party of the year, the biggest party of the year, is our awards banquet in December. And that's where we sort of a Christmas party and awards banquet all rolled into one. Also catered events, open bars, live music, that sort of thing.
And approximately how many people attend those two big parties, the summer party and the winter party, the Christmas party?
Last 2 years we've been in the neighborhood of 110, 120 people at those parties.
Right. So these are fairly big events for a fleet,
a
small boat fleet.
Well, the way I'd like to put this is, this I believe is unique. It's another thing unique to the class, is that most class organizations usually have a class championship once a year. But the way these things work is everybody brings their boat to the class championship, which means people are trailering boats around the country for the most part, going through whatever it takes to get your boat there and staying in hotels and things like that. And then they go out and fight with each other in the water, and then they all go home. That whole way of doing things is kind of antithetical to the basic simplistic approach of the Harbor 20. Because the Harbor 20, we've decided we'd do something different. We move people, not boats. That's another thing I think that makes this fleet work really well, is that the divisions are broken up so that people are, for the most part, sailing against people of equal or close skill level. And that makes it better for everybody. I think you'll find, if you looked at those results, the people that you're going to find at the top of the A were the people that I was mentioning earlier, some of the best sailors of the entire country. The winner of the event was John Pinckney. People in sailing circles know that name. Second this year, who had won this event 5 years past is Bill Menninger, ex-North Sales person. And then Argyle Campbell, people in the sail world know him. People like Jim Buckingham, and so on and so forth. These are some of the top sailors in the country, and we saw them finishing the event just where we would expect to finish them. I myself was finishing slightly under the middle of the pack, which is where I believe my skill level is today with this bunch of people.
I think what was fascinating about those top level sailors is that the top 5 of them all sailed with their wives. Gail Pickney, Diane Menninger, Bridget Campbell, Karen Thorne, and Mary Buckingham.
Absolutely, and I sail with my wife too. As I said earlier, I thought the majority of people out competing on this fleet, and you mentioned other fleets, are sailing as couples. As I told you, the class was essentially conceived by people mostly in the retirement age at Newport Harbor Yacht Club to get sailing. And so for many years, the people would see out in the boats were older people. And in fact, the most derogatory term that I ever heard for a Harbor 20 was a water walker.
A water walker?
A water walker. Because these white-haired guys are out sailing these things with their white-haired wives, but they're outside, and that's where the fleet started. That was happening. About 6 years ago, they decided to try to do the team racing in Harbor 20s, and they did that for the first time. This is a 4-on-4 team racing invitational event. So there are people coming from New York Yacht Club and Sewanee Yacht Club and St. Francis and all the way around Larchmont Yacht Club. All over the country are invited to come out and do this. And the people who would come out and do this were a much younger crowd than had ever sailed this boat before. And when they first saw it, they went, it doesn't seem so like too simple. But when you get in the boat and try it, you'll find that even though it doesn't have lots of lines, and the lines it does have are really well, nicely organized, that the mast bends and the sails shape the way any racing boat does. It does all those things. And when you sort of get used to the fact that the cockpit cushions have to be in place, that's a class rule while you're racing, that you are actually comfortable when you're racing. Some of these guys got off the water and said, that was different and that was fun. And now we're coming on the 5th or 6th year event, and this event has turned into something that's now one of the premier team races in the entire country. It's the must-attend event, and it's also a spectator event in that Newport Harbor Yacht Club has figured out how to get rid of all the moorings in front of their facility for this event, and then they drop the marks right off the docks. And so there are spectators, chairs on the docks, up on the patio. There are color commentators. There's drones with television cameras and TVs, and it's that whole thing. So it's quite a spectator event. You can see 100 people down there just looking at it. So people have now seen the best sailors in the world. Teams are now coming from England to this as well, sailing these boats, and on some years we've had quite a bit of wind. In fact, we've raced this event with every boat reefed. And so we're now getting some of the best sailors in the world sailing the most comfortable boat in the world and liking it. And that has changed. It has changed the perception of the boat for a lot of people. And quite a few of those people that started in that, such as John Pinkney and Bill Menninger, in other words, are now Harbor 20 boat owners themselves. They weren't when they started. They were participants in that event.
Come hear Uncle John's band playing to the tide. Come on along and go alone. He's come to take his children home.